Our first panel, let me call you up here to come join us. Cindy Clemshire, Catherine Robb, and Elizabeth Phillips. So we're very glad that you're here. This is an important issue to this committee, and your testimony is vital to us today. And so thank you for being here. Elizabeth, I'm going to ask you to go first. We're going to go Elizabeth, Cindy, and then Catherine. And so thanks for being here. If you'll identify yourself, and the committee's glad you're here today.
Thank you, Chair Leach. I'm Elizabeth Phillips from Dallas District 108. Thank you. I know we're between you and lunch, so appreciate your attention. I'm here to speak today on behalf of my late brother, Trey Carlock. He would have been 34 this Monday. I'm also certified in crime victim advocacy and serve as the executive director of the Phillips Foundation, which privately funds the issue we're briefing you on today. I said my brother would have been 34 on Monday, but because he was silenced to his grave by Kanakuk Ministries, a summer camp based in southwest Missouri. Texas is their largest market, though. He is no longer with us. First, he was groomed and abused from the age of 7 to 17 by a serial sex offender named Pete Newman. Then he was forced by the Texas Civil Statute of Limitations to file his civil case against Kanakuk before the ripe age of 23. That stressful and re-traumatizing civil litigation process ended with a settlement involving a restrictive NDA. I have actually learned more about the extent of my brother's abuse and his death than I knew in his life. He died by suicide in 2019, and now that I've caught my breath, I'm trying to be his voice. And not just his. Since my family was public about Trey's abuse in the Dallas Morning News obituary, we've heard from countless victims who have similar stories to Trey's. These boys, now men, have been suffering in silence from the NDAs Kanakuk and its agents demanded behind closed doors, with attorneys who would gaslight and intimidate victims in depositions that led to my brother's first psychotic break. Separately from Trey, Kanakuk sanctioned a Texas John Doe whose parents refused to sign the NDA clause on behalf of their minor son, costing them an additional $40,000 in legal fees. It's so hard to fight wealthy institutions while you're also fighting for your kid's life. Many other parents did silence their children inadvertently when they signed settlement agreements with Kanakuk on behalf of their minor child, not realizing they had signed away their son's voice. Not only was his innocence taken, but then his voice too. When survivors coalesced and called Kanakuk out, we posted a petition and got 30,000 signatures for the release of NDAs by Kanakuk. And when I say my brother was silenced to his grave, I mean he was literally scared to death. He hesitated even to tell his story in confidential therapeutic settings for fear that Kanakuk would come after him again, like they did an earlier John Doe. He said to someone a few days before he died that they'll always control me and I'll never be free. And that's what it feels like to be put under NDA when you've survived a childhood crime. I believe when he said that he was talking about the NDA, and what's unfortunate is that NDA is still enforceable even in his death, according to the probate attorney of his estate. And sadly, a lot of truth dies with people because of NDAs. I've read some of the NDAs these victims are under, and they're atrociously detailed and have everything to do with protecting an organization's reputation over the interests of an abused child and his long-term healing. It's no exaggeration for me to claim this as a matter of life and death. Why is this life and death? I think we know what child sexual abuse does to a person's life, does to a kid. And I think we also know how healing happens. It's by sharing your story in safe places, finding support and solidarity in the midst of navigating unfathomable pain. That's the whole basis of cognitive behavioral therapy, the Alcoholics Anonymous model. When you take someone's voice away, especially a child's, you take away their most linear path to healing. Sexual abuse happens in secrecy and shame, and we need to take the furtherance of those shadows off the table in the civil courts of Texas. This should be a welcomed measure of justice so that future child crime victims do not have my brother's outcome. I get asked a lot since becoming more public about this issue on a national level. Why would your brother sign an NDA? Was he physically forced? He had a choice. Well, actually, when you've been abused and gaslighted and re-traumatized in a civil litigation process, you're exhausted just trying to function, and an opposing counsel offers you 7 figures if you just sign on the dotted line saying this will end, just sign here. The system is abuse on top of abuse. So out of exhaustion, my brother and many other Kanakuk victims sign on the dotted line. They need money for a lifetime of care because crimes perpetrated by a serial sex offender and institutional leadership that enabled the predation have changed their lives for the worse. And it's a lifelong healing journey. But for them, it's not about the money. My brother referred to his settlement as blood money, as if he had betrayed his own soul to keep Kanakuk secrets. And it killed him. So institutions that have something to hide want full secrecy and confidentiality clauses. In civil litigation, they nearly always start with an extensive and comprehensive NDA and a settlement agreement. They go by many names: non-disclosure, non-disparagement, confidentiality clause. But what we're talking about, I'm using the term broadly, NDA. It's actually become quite widely accepted as best practice. Money for your silence. It sounds like a bribe to me. And unless you have a trauma-informed advocate, you may not read the fine print or realize you're signing away your voice in that moment. You just want the re-traumatization to end. This practice is nothing short of evil, as it protects darkness, and bad actors only win. We need to change this widespread abuse and misuse of NDAs in Texas. NDAs are for trade secrets, not trauma secrets. There's another quote that says, "Shame dies when stories are told in safe spaces." Tennessee made itself safer in 2018 when they passed a bill eradicating the misuse of NDAs in civil child sexual abuse cases. 17 other states have clarified the NDA issue for their courts too. A movement has been building with organizations like Lift Our Voices and NDA Free, leading a global conversation on this topic. The federal passage of the Speak Out Act in 2022, which Phillips Foundation supported, had overwhelming bipartisan support. And that tells me that as Americans, if we were ready to eradicate the weaponization of NDAs against survivors of sexual harassment in the workplace, surely this state, my state, is ready to assure and extend the same protection to children, and child trafficking and child sex abuse victims particularly. It's the least we can do if we're to be the responsible adults in the room. Should this be granted a hearing during session, survivors stand by to testify on the harm of NDAs, the silent killer. Yes, silence actually kills, as my family knows. We hope that Texas chooses to join this movement and that it's an easy decision, a moral one, and deemed an urgent matter of public safety and concern. Thank you for your attention to this critical issue and for welcoming survivors' perspectives. Our panel will continue to provide testimony, and we're happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And yeah, let me go to Cindy and then Catherine, and then we'll have some questions for you. Cindy, thanks for being here.